Welcome to the Petersen's Bowhunting Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Now, here's your host, Editor Christian Berg.
All right, welcome to the Bowhunting Podcast. We are all bow hunting all the time, and today we are coming into the magical, the most wonderful time of the year. It's not Christmas, it's the whitetail rut. And if you don't think that's the most wonderful time of the year, you ain't no deer hunter. And I've got guests today that are going to be bringing us exactly what we need right now as we head toward Halloween. Tactics you can use today to get those bucks on the ground. It's Mr. Laden Force and Mr. Haynes Shelton, my colleagues, my compadres, co-hosts, and editor and publisher of North American Whitetail magazine, North American Whitetail television. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, Christian. We appreciate it, man. We're excited to be here. We get to hear the podcast all the time and hear you talk to everybody else. And so when you called and said, hey, would you guys be interested? I know Haynes and I we hopped on the opportunity. It's a real privilege to be here with you.
Christian, I'm so excited to be here, man, that I climbed out of my tree stand in Adams County, Ohio, right in the middle of this cold front. And I'm sitting on top of my pickup truck with a little bit of cell service just to talk to you, buddy.
I knew you guys would drop everything as soon as I called. And, I'm glad that somebody's out in the field, because here I'm sitting in my basement. Laden's obviously at home. Somebody's got to get out there and tell us what's actually happening. So Haynes, I mean, this is the point, right? I mean, we're literally heading into Halloween week. I was just telling you before we started recording, it's really not happening yet for me here in Pennsylvania. And I don't think it's really happening for you in Ohio based on what you've been seeing. But this is the time when day by day, literally day by day, I think we're all kind of scooting a little closer to the edge of our seats, right? Because we're like, it's going to happen. It's going to start to happen. And we're going to start to see those bucks cruising. And we're going to start to see those deer maybe visiting those scrape lines in the daylight versus, 2 in the morning. And that those first does are going to come into estrus here probably, within the next 4 to 6 days, in your area, a doe or two is going to come in. And man, if you're in the right place at the right time, it's going to be crazy. So what do you think, Haynes? What is your mindset as you finish this hunt in Ohio and look ahead here to the next week or two?
Well, it's been great to get in the woods here in Ohio the last 3 days we've hunted. And, it's definitely pre-rut right now and pre-rut activity, which is, kind of the initial phase of the rut that we all wait for. And it's a good time of year because you start to see a lot of visible deer sign. And that's definitely been the case for us here in Ohio. And, there's a lot of nighttime scrape activity that we're picking up on trail cameras. And then, going in and out of our sets in the evenings and mornings, you can see fresh scrapes and fresh rubs every time. And in addition to that, we also are starting to pick up some bucks in daylight on trail cameras, that's the magic that you wait for, and this cold front really was the impetus for a lot of that daylight movement. Everybody talks about cold fronts in October and how magical they can be when they arrive. And it's kind of been that way here because prior to, the weather 80s, which is not that unusual for, second week of October, third week of October. And when I got here 3 days ago, it had dropped into daily highs in the 40s and then lows at night in the 20s. And we've had 3 mornings of frost on the ground. So definitely getting that good cold snap. And we're starting to see it working to, get bucks up on their feet, lay down sign, and not necessarily chasing does or dogging does or anything like that, but they're starting just to move around. And some of the guys that I've been in camp with this week. There's a father and son from West Virginia. I've gotten to know them pretty well. And the father, he tagged an awesome buck 2 mornings ago. It's a 160-inch deer that he killed at 9:30 in the morning, walking a scrape line in broad daylight. So when stuff like that starts happening, you need to be in the woods as much as you can.
Laden, I don't know about you, but the hair on the back of my neck just stood up when he told me that there was a mature buck hitting scrapes at 9:30 a.m.
Yeah, man, I get pumped about it. I got to sneak out a couple mornings here this week and a couple nights this week. We had one of our videographers from Winter come in, the guy that I work with mostly for the TV show, and we were shooting some digital pieces for the website, and we snuck out to try to support some of that digital footage or stand-ups with field footage. And so, I would mirror what Haynes is saying in regards to what we're seeing here in Northeast Missouri. You're seeing more daylight deer activity. I've not seen as much mature buck daylight activity, but I'm seeing those mature bucks at night. And, it's that time of year and we're all waiting for those cold fronts. And, we've had some great articles. We just had an article that went live on NAW's website that I think it's titled "Is October the New November?" And it actually addresses a lot of what Haynes kind of talking about in regards to, hey, the timing's right. Now we're waiting for that cold weather to kick in and really get those mature deer on their feet during daylight hours. And this is a great time period for that to happen. And so to hear a guy or about a guy arrowing a 160 plus inch big old Ohio bruiser at 9:30 in the morning, it just kind of confirms some of what we like to hear, what we've read, what we talk about as a team. And man, I'm excited. I'm going to turn loose here next weekend. I'm going to try to do a little hunting at home over the weekend with my boys. I got 2 young boys that we're trying to get bucks on the ground for with a crossbow this week. And so it's just it's a good time. Like you can hear, I can't even keep a concentrated thought as I'm trying to talk to you about it right now. I'm just all giddy and confused, kind of like a 3-year-old out running around for the first time with a bigger set of antlers on my head at the end of October. So it's that time of year.
Yeah, people say that I'm high energy, but I think Laden's giving me a run for my money today. I mean, look at that. He's got a grin from ear to ear. You can just tell, actually, as you were talking, like, I think you might actually just throw that headset on the desk and literally just turn around and go get your stuff and head straight to the tree right now.
Man, if I didn't have 2 media kits and some reader survey questions to finish and a few ad sales projects, including one for Petersen's Bowhunting New Gear Guide, which we're looking forward to seeing here in a couple months from your team.
Baby, sell those space, sell that space. Well, listen, I mean, here's the thing, you mentioned it. Okay. You guys have that article, Is October the New November? And I don't know who put that together for you guys. Bill Winke had recently done a very similar piece for us. And so here's the thing, right? Because as we get through this next week here, heading in towards Halloween, because so this show will drop on Tuesday. Halloween will be Sunday. Monday, rather. Monday, Sunday will be the 30th. Monday's Halloween. And as we get then into early November, that's where we're going to start to transition into, really that time of the rut where things become exciting, but also chaotic and unpredictable. And so I think when we talk about this, Is October the New November, what we're really talking about, and again, this is what people should be keying on this week as they listen to this show and plan their hunts and where they're going to go and what they're going to do. This is the time. It's not the calm before the storm, but it's maybe the little squall before the storm. And once the storm hits, all bets are off, because, that buck that you've been watching all year might be where you think he's going to be, but he might be 5 miles away because a doe decided to run from him and they chased clear across, 3 farms last night, and he's not going to be back for a while. So late October is great because It's starting to get a little taste of that chaos that's coming, but there's still an element of predictability. So those bucks that live in your area, they're working those scrape lines and they're visiting them at night for the most part, but that's going to change. There's going to be a couple daylight appearances. And if you can be there in the right place, right time, that's where you can tag that buck like Haynes talked about. Those doe concentration areas, okay? This is a big one for me. I'll throw this one out. And this is the thing for me, especially in Pennsylvania, because we don't have a ton of big bucks. The best I can do for the most part is know, like, okay, I know there's 10 or 12 doe that are coming out in the field here every night. I know there's a group of doe over here. I know there's some doe that always bed over there. And I'm not going to bother with them too much, maybe up until this week, because now it's like, you know what? If I get the wind right, and I can tuck myself in there and be where I know those does are going to be, this is going to be the week where maybe, just maybe, one of those decent bucks is actually going to come and he's going to start checking on those doe, because it's like they're getting antsy. You know what I mean? Just like we're getting antsy as bow hunters, those bucks are getting antsy because they're ready to rock. But it's like when you go to the club and you like get out on the dance floor and you see that cute girl and you're dancing with her a little bit, but you're still not really sure, is like this girl going to give me her number, or is she going to like really want to hang out with me later on? You know what I mean? But you're wanting to stay close. You're wanting to keep her in eyesight to see if she's talking to maybe anybody else or what her body language is telling you, right? And that's what these bucks are doing. I mean, am I crazy, Haynes, or what?
No, I think you're right. And for me, this time of year, in the pre-rut phase, before things do just bust wide open and really get crazy, it's more of a still tactical game that I'm trying to figure out my mornings and my evenings individually, because I'm really not much of a morning hunter any part of the year outside of November, just because I think you can do much more harm than good in most places, unless you just have the perfect set for a morning entry route, without spooking deer. If you have some kind of transition area or, back door to bedding while deer are coming off of agriculture or something like that. But I do think that this is the time of year where you can really make hay in transition areas, in morning spots and evening spots, based on what deer are doing and where you think you can safely go. Like I'm not hunting all day right now, November, when things get completely crazy and bucks are actively chasing, and you have probably as good a chance to shoot one at 10:30 a.m. or 1 p.m. or, mid-afternoon, whenever, as you do early morning and evening. That's when you need to be in the tree stand all day long and really sitting on go. But right now, in reference to, doe bedding or doe groups, you do have to kind of understand those areas and understand, in contrast, where you think your buck is living. Like if you're hunting a target buck, you have to kind of have an understanding of where you think he is. And then you do a little bit of math. You consider where he is, and you consider probably where your doe groups are. Well, somewhere in the middle is going to be a transition zone. And that's going to be probably an area where does and bucks are going to intermingle with each other. That's the dance floor, like you're talking about. And so if you can position yourself in a location like that, you're probably going to find sign there, whether you're looking at new scrapes or, signpost rubs that have been there for years. If you can get a good route into a place like that and hunt it based on whether it either needs to be hunted in the morning or the evening, every spot's different. But if you can get in those locations, if you can get that in combination with a good weather and the wind's working for you, then there's a good chance that you're probably going to see a buck on his feet starting to work the outside perimeter of those doe areas. And for me, it seems like, especially a mature buck, they're always going to work downwind of those doe bedding areas, because they're going to circle back behind there. They're not necessarily going to bust right into a full chase right now, because it's not the rut, but they will begin to sort of actively search for that first doe. And usually that's going to be, your hyper mature, your oldest, most mature doe is probably going to cycle into estrus first. And so, you can imagine your most dominant buck is going to be waiting for that to happen. And I think a lot of times they do that relatively casually by sort of going downwind of these doe bedding areas and checking it. They might check it every day or every couple of days, but whatever route they're running, that's where you need to be for when it happens, and hope that you're there when it does happen.
Yeah, it's one thing I noticed. It was really interesting this year. I don't know what you guys saw. We had, well, it's been a little colder than normal overall this October, but early in October, we had a good snap of really unseasonably cool weather here in Pennsylvania. And I was very surprised for about 3 or 4 days in like the first week of October. I actually had a handful of mature buck photos in daylight as the scrapes were just opening up for the season. Like some of the first scrapes that popped like in October. And then all of a sudden it was done. Like those bucks, they came up like out of their holes. They made a couple appearances. They opened up some scrapes, and then there was no more daylight activity. And ever since, it's kind of just been back to that nighttime stuff. But to Haynes's point, and what I am seeing to kind of corroborate what he said is you don't see them every day, but it might be every 3 to 4 days. It's like they're running their circuit and they're coming back around and checking these scrapes. And, this is another thing not to overlook, because people think, scrapes are only for bucks. If you look at your trail cam photos, man, I see a lot of does visit these scrapes too. So it's a social signpost communication area. Yeah, I mean, the bucks may be, starting a lot of these scrapes or refreshing them, but the does are checking in there too. And I'm sure they're leaving some interdigital scent and rubbing their heads on some of these licking branches and things too. So those bucks are making their rounds and kind of keeping tabs on what's going on late. Kind of wondering, Laden, what is your strategy for this week here, the week sort of leading up to Halloween?
Yeah, I would say like talking on the heels of what Haynes is talking about, because as far as strategy and where from a placement aspect, those transition areas that you're going to hunt, I think it's a hard lesson as whitetail hunters we all have to learn. I can think back to some of my early bow hunting days from 15 to the age of 25, and always wanting to hunt the field edge because that's what I always saw on outdoor television, right? Everybody hunts a scrape line on the edge of the cut bean field in late October, early November, and that's where all the bucks are. And I've learned as I got a little bit older, if you want to increase the level of time at which you get the opportunity to interact with a mature buck, you're going to have to get back on that path and really understand the science behind why they're doing what they're doing. Talking, directly towards that being downwind of a doe bedding area or a place where that doe social group likes to hang out. From a staging aspect, and learning to kind of read the body language of some of those younger bucks. Those younger bucks are going to start getting a little, they're going to get up on their feet a little earlier than those mature bucks are in reference to the calendar, but they can kind of give those visual cues of, hey, it's getting ready to happen too. And so for me personally, I know I just was looking again this morning as I was drinking my coffee, the 25th, we've got a cold weather front coming back into the Midwest. I'm going to be here at home. I'm really watching those trail cameras at this point in time. And that's another thing that I've learned to use to my advantage. I've got pretty limited time usually in the month of October, just because it's busy season for us in regards to business planning and looking forward into the next year. So I really don't get as much time to hit the woods until the last week, October and early November. So I've got to make my time in October count, even that last week. And with that cold front coming in, man, I'm watching my cameras. They've all been replaced or placed on scrapes now, repositioned to watch scrapes to try and track that mature buck movement. And I'm watching 2 or 3 bucks here at home that in particular I want to get after when they start to pop in daylight hours. And as far as next week goes, I'm really planning on spending some time in the woods when that cold weather hits and putting myself in those transition areas where those bucks are going to be specifically there on those farms that I'll be hunting. So, a lot of it mirrors what Haynes says, but that would probably make sense because the two of us spend a lot of time together studying from, the same doctrine of Dr. Deere and Mr. Whittington and guys like Greg Miller and Stan Potts. So we spend a lot of time. We talk back and forth between each other, but it's going to mirror exactly what he is talking about. Just making sure that when that cold weather hits, I'm in the right place, and really making sure that I'm using the visual cues of the deer if I'm getting out before then to try and understand what that independent social group's doing there on some of those farms. And then also using that trail camera inventory. And I will tell you, man, we got a couple warm days coming today and tomorrow. Use that warmth to your advantage as a whitetail hunter. Right now, if you've got trail cameras that aren't communicating, if you're using wireless trail cameras, back to your app or your service, go out and check those trail cameras out in the middle of the day when you can use the heat to your advantage. Those big bucks aren't going to be on their feet. Do it now before that cold weather hits next week and we get into the first week of November, and you don't want to be getting into those areas and potentially place an influence or human influence on that hunting area. So this is a great time these next couple of days to make sure that, hey, new sets, new cameras, anything that you want to try to sneak into your place and try to be as uninvasive as possible, and get it done now before they get back up on their feet and they're moving around a little bit more. Use that heat to your advantage.
Great tip there.
I'm kind of wondering, guys, obviously we're talking about where to be, areas to focus on, hunting maybe more evenings than mornings at this point. Kind of wondering, is there anything, and obviously trail cameras too, Laden, which is absolutely critical, and certainly the cellular cameras have changed the game. But what about when you're actually out there hunting? I think about peak rut and you're thinking, maybe doing a bunch of fight sequences with your rattling antlers, or maybe putting, some estrus doe urine out, that sort of thing. What about during this pre-rut period? What is your sort of philosophy on calling, scents, any kind of, active things that you can do to try and tip the odds in your favor during this time where, it's not really full on yet?
Haynes, you want me to cover that first?
Either way, man, I would just say, I immediately think of calling just because of what happened to me this morning. I just got out of the tree stand about an hour ago. But at first light this morning, I did just a little calling sequence with my grunt call. We've got a good friend of ours, Chris Riggs at Duck Creek Custom Calls that works with us at North American Whitetail. And he sent us some awesome custom made grunt calls this year. And so I'm just eager to use it. It's such a great call. I just want to play with it, So this morning, it felt good. It's 28 degrees, and right at daylight, as soon as, my cameraman, Brad Biddle, said he had camera light, I said, I think I'm going to call a little bit, just to see what happens. It was a transition area. I had CRP behind me, which, that was a bedding area, and, ag fields are below me. And then I'm kind of halfway up this big hillside. And I knew that, deer were going to be filtering through this little white oak lot where I was going back to that CRP. And so I did 2 estrus bleats, and then waited about 30 seconds, and I grunted 3 times. And I did 2 longer grunts, and then sort of a little cadence of almost like a chase grunt, like a bear, bear, bear. And about 1 minute later, a 2-year-old buck, a nice young 8-pointer basket rack buck, he came out immediately and head on a swivel. You could tell the deer was not walking through my area. He came as a direct result of the calling, and he, tilted his head left and right, clearly looking for what he had heard. And he ended up walking about 8 yards from the base of our tree stand, and then he just filtered on through. And so, if that had been a 5 or 6 year old buck like we're trying to kill, boom, I could have put an arrow right through his lungs, and the hunt was over. So, it would have been great, but even seeing that young buck do that, that's what you want to see, especially right now. You think, there we go, it's working. It worked on that buck. There's no reason why it wouldn't work on a big deer, and I would say right now, depending on what deer you're hunting, and you need to kind of understand the buck that you're trying to kill and his mentality, in that spot.
Yep. Very important.
I felt like it was the right place to try that, because I wasn't like in a spot where a buck was going to come right there. I just thought, well, I need to do something to make a deer filter through here if he's close enough to hear me. So I tried that. And I want to mention too, so I'm here with my friends at Real McCoy Outdoors in Adams County. Chad and Lear McCoy are hosting me, and these guys deserve some credit because they understand their whitetails so well. And every deer we go after here, I get sort of a briefing on what we think this deer is like, and kind of what his personality is, and what we think he's going to respond to or not. And in the evenings, we've been hunting a really old, probably a 7 or 8 year old deer. He's a giant, and we've been trying to kill him this week. And it's really kind of a different scenario. This buck is daylighted on trail cameras, and he's living in the mountains, and he's coming down into this little valley, and he's been there in daylight. And he is very much a dominant buck, but he's almost so casual in that area that with him, we all agreed that we don't want to do any calling, and we don't want to use any scent. We don't want to do anything, so we've just been washing our clothing. We've been using our ozonics. We've been walking in really, really quietly. So with a deer like that, we've adopted a 0 human presence, 0 sound, 0 scent policy. And like, we think in order to kill this deer, like, he's already doing what we want him to do. So we're just going to sit there and be quiet and hope that he does it again. Mm-hmm. But with other deer, you might need to do something to make those deer come to you. So, I would say people listening to this, probably somebody's going to have a similar scenario. And, there's some deer that you want to put a little bit of pressure on, and you want to do something to influence how that deer is going to react. But there's other deer that you might not want to do anything. Just let Mother Nature handle it, and he might come right in.
Right. I think that you just touched on one of the things that I talk quite often, Haynes, with people about when they start asking questions about what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on that? And regardless of the point in the season, you said, hey, know your deer, right? And that's something that it took me a while as a hunter to get used to, was not getting caught up in the moment. To the point of Christian's comment earlier, I get pretty excited and I love the moment. I am in the moment, man. I love it, but slow it down a little bit. When that buck walks out, let's say you're hunting that October cold front and he comes out across that transition zone, you don't get an opportunity on him, but slow down and take some notes on how he acts. Watch how he reacts to maybe a doe bleat from a doe that's in the same area at the same time, or the way that he might react to a 2-year-old coming up and trying to put a little pressure on him and tinkle antlers with him. Does he completely shut the situation down, or does he walk around him? Because that will tell you a lot about how you need to hunt that animal over the next 2-3 weeks as you pursue him into, the heat of the rut. And if you slow the situation down, even if you're self-filming, I think that's one of the big advantages that I took away from self-filming before I ever got into this occupation was later on in life, I went back and I went, oh, wow, I have a video document of how these deer react in their home surroundings. And you can go back, and it's kind of like, going through your scouting report for your football game on Friday night or Saturday afternoon. You go back and you watch film on your opponent. Well, in this case, that buck is your opponent, and you can kind of break down what they're doing, take notes on it. If you had an encounter on him, take a note as to what the wind was, where he came from, what he did when he got to the edge of the field. Did he scent check, or did he look around the field and try to get a visual documentation of what's going on in that field? Because a lot of that can help you prepare for that next encounter that you're going to have with that whitetail deer. So it's really easy to get caught up in the moment, but if you can take the time and slow the situation down and document it in some way, shape, or form, it's going to put you in a much better situation as you move forward and have the opportunity to hunt that deer or potentially other deer in that area. Just watching how they react and come out of a pinch point or into a pinch point, or with different winds. There's a lot of different things that if you slow the situation down, you can learn a lot from that situation about that specific animal or the community of deer.
Well, another thing that you guys touched on that came to my mind as you were talking is, the Hippocratic oath, right? When you're a doctor, you take the Hippocratic oath when you become a doctor. And what's the first rule of that is to do no harm, right? And I think that's kind of the approach we need to take with our deer hunting, especially right now. You know, Haynes talked about how sometimes there's a deer that you need to do something to try to get them to come to you, but other times, you know, and this is where I jump over to what you were saying, Laden. We can get caught up in the moment. We get so excited, especially maybe an inexperienced deer hunter, where you're out on your stand and that buck that you've been seeing on your camera, but you've never seen him in real life, you know, and all of a sudden, boom, there he pops out 40 yards away. And man, you're going to, quick, grab my grunt tube and I'm going to grunt at him or I'm going to doe bleat. And it's like, dude, he might be coming right to you. Do nothing. Do nothing. Read the situation and see what's going to happen. Yeah, I mean, if he's going to start to go the other way and it's pretty obvious that he's not going to come into bow range, yeah, maybe throw a bleat or a little grunt out there and start a little soft, and you know, you'll know when he hears it if you're paying attention. Start soft, increase your volume, you know, a little bit each time until you get a reaction. I can almost always get a reaction out of a deer. It doesn't mean that he's going to come. He might just stop and look. Matter of fact, a lot of times a buck is just going to stop and look, think about it for a little bit, and then he may end up going on its way. Let him go. You know, don't necessarily think, again, we're not peak rut here. You know, don't think, oh, if he doesn't come to my grunt, now I'm going to hit him with the snort wheeze or whatever. It's there's a time and a place. And right now, you know, if you have a deer on a pattern like that old buck that Haynes is talking about, exactly, the deer's already doing everything it needs to do to die. Haynes just has to be there on the right day. You know what I mean? So he's not going to go in there and throw out a bunch of scent. He's not going to go in there and make 3 new mock scrapes. He's not going to go in there and start crashing antlers together. He's just going to let the deer do what he do. And Haynes already has the information that he needs to be successful.
Sometimes less is more in that situation, more times than not. When it comes to calling tactics specifically, Christian, less is more. So to your point of crashing horns or hammering the snort wheeze, like, hey, starting out with a nice subtle bleat just to see how he reacts, it can go a long ways. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and don't remember, or don't don't remember. No, I mean, don't forget. The deer can hear a lot better than you can. You know, I can remember a big Alberta 10-pointer, and I was hunting in the woods, not too far off of the edge of a cut grain field up there. And I had seen a bunch of deer earlier in the morning, and it got real quiet for a couple hours, and it was like, I don't know, 10:30 in the morning or something like that. And this big buck comes across the open grain field rather, couple hundred yards out. And I can see he's going to hit the wood line, you know, about 200 yards away from my stand. And he hit that wood line, and I took my old can call out of my pocket. And I'm telling you, I hit that can call 2 times, and he hit the wood, took a 90 degree and came right to me. I mean, it didn't take much, and it was a real cold morning. You know, you can see all the breath coming out of his nostrils, and I can remember his tongue. He was licking all the little brush, you know, along the ground. And I mean, it doesn't take a lot sometimes. And if they want to come, they'll come. And conversely, you know, I'm sure Haynes can, because he's better than I am. But if they don't want to come, it can be awfully tough to get them to come. Once in a while, you can piss off an aggressive buck enough to get him to change his mind and completely change course. But I'll tell you what I see a lot more often, and you guys can weigh in on this. What I see a lot more often is if you call to a buck and you get a reaction out of that buck and he doesn't come, don't be surprised if that buck isn't back in 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour, because I think bucks are usually on a mission, and he doesn't come. He wants to go somewhere. because he's got on his mind, I'm going to check this doe bedding area, or I'm going to hit this scrape over here, or I'm going to check this food plot over there. But then he gets over there and there's nothing going on. And now he still knows, like, man, I heard Laden grunt over here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna swing back around. And I have killed deer that did that, like they come back. And so rather than get too crazy, just let that be. Let him think about it for a while. It's like play hard to get. Let him think about that a while and decide if he doesn't want to swing back through and investigate.
I'll let Haynes touch on that. Oh, there he goes. I was say I'll let him touch on that one because I know he has some experience in that category as well.
Anyway, so yes, it's like a rebound effect or a boomerang, and I've seen that happen too. And mature buck he's out there doing mature buck stuff, but you gave him something he's processing in his mind, and there's always that chance that he is going to come just gone forever. And and one of my biggest pet peeves too, and I know it happens to everybody, but okay, when he leaves, don't telling everybody, oh man, I just saw this giant buck and he's gone. I think that's one of the biggest things that I tried not to do, especially this time of year. You really need to try and be as present as you can in the deer woods. And all your buddies that you're texting about and all the deer pages that you're looking at on Instagram or Facebook, or when you're checking out North American Whitetail or Petersen's Bowhunting, websites when you're sitting in the stand. Well, you can do all that stuff at home, and you're doing it because you love deer hunting, and you're doing it because you want to see pictures of big deer and read about it. But, you love it because you want to be successful. And so when you're in the stand, just try and be patient this time of year and be present and just enjoy being in the woods and be cognizant and try and sit there and don't move. That's the main thing is, don't move, don't fidget, do whatever you can to just stay there in your stand and always be ready. Keep your head on a swivel and try not to get distracted and just really, really focus in and try and get it done. Because that's what you're out there to do. You're there because you love it. So just enjoy being out there.
Yeah. That's a hard one with everybody that's 35 and under at this point in time. Because like you said, everybody's surfing the gram, looking at everybody's big deer that have been harvested, but it can be more true, man. You have to pay attention to what's going on around you. And I'm like, hey, I'm guilty of that, have been guilty of it. But I will tell you that this year, at the age of 37, I did finally limit my social screen time on my phone in the last 3 weeks. But a lot of it was because, hey, I knew I was spending too much time there. And I probably still wasn't spending near as much time as a lot of folks, but I limited it down. It's amazing how quickly it goes, but you got to think you only get so much time out there, to Haynes's point. You're trying to take everything in and process it and build that story and build that strategy. And, just with everything else that's going on out there in the world outside of what you're trying to accomplish as a bow hunter or as a deer hunter right now at this point in time, like slow down for a second, let your brain process nature. And I'm telling you, man, like that is such a great place to be mentally. It is such a good place to be for your soul. Just really take in everything that's going in. It doesn't matter if it's 85 degrees or if it's 32 degrees. There's great things happening out there in nature that we tend to forget about when we look at our screen all the time. So really enjoy that moment. Take a deep breath while you're out there. Let nature heal all woes, and just pay attention to what's going on, man. I'm telling you, there's so much going on out there. Even when a deer's not in front of you, there's other things that are going on that you can learn about that will tell you so much about the woods and your environment and what you're sitting in, what you're taking in. There's a lot that you can learn if you're not looking at that screen.
Well, I tell you what, that's great advice. I think that's a great place to wrap up our conversation, gentlemen, because, it's an excellent week to punch your tag. But even if you don't, enjoy the moment and stay optimistic, because as good as this week is, the next couple weeks that are coming after it are going to be even better. So take heart, deer hunters of the world. Our time has finally arrived, and we will close out maybe the way that I began. It is the most wonderful time of the year, and it's only just beginning. And, let everybody else who's into, football or Christmas shopping or ballroom dancing or whatever they're in, they can have their time, but this is our time. And as Laden said, let's relish it, because it isn't going to be very long. We're going to be thinking back on this season and wishing we could get back in that tree again. So put that old smartphone back in your pocket and watch that squirrel, listen to those turkeys scratching just over the ridge. Listen, watch those birds flying around in the treetop. And before you know it, Haynes will be telling us about the big old buck that walked right under his tree like he drew it up. Haynes, thank you, buddy. I hope you get it done there in Ohio.
Christian, you bet, man. Thank you so much for having me on. It's great talking to you, man. I hope to be back soon, and I hope you're my good luck charm, man. I'm gonna go out there and try and shoot him this afternoon.
I hope so too.
I tell you what, if you kill that buck, then you may have to write that feature for Petersen's Bowhunting, not North American Whitetail.
You'll have to talk to my publisher about that.
We can negotiate. We can negotiate that afterwards.
Yeah, we'll negotiate. well, listen, guys. I tell you what, it was a good conversation. It's first time I had the NAW boys on the show, but like Haynes said, let's make sure it's not the last.
That's exactly right. Hey, Christian, I'll leave you with one thing. I stepped outside yesterday and thought, hey, I haven't shot my bow for like 4 days. Been on the go. We were filming and going to the stand, and everything was going on. And I typically every day shooting that bow. And I stepped out, just wanted to get a few rounds in before I took my son to football practice last night. And man, I let that first arrow go, and it was 7 inches left at 30 yards. And I thought, oh my goodness, I must have really torqued my bow. And drew back and let another one go, and it hit bullet point right next to the other one. And I let third one go, same thing. And, for a guy that shoots his bow, let's say 8 days out of the 30 to 31 days a month, depending on the month, that was really surprising that happened to me. So, hey, as much as we talk about strategy and getting set up and putting yourself in the right position for that animal, make sure you're shooting your bow, make sure you're shooting your crossbow. If you do a little firearms hunting in the month of November, make sure your equipment's on point. We owe it to ourselves and we owe it to the animal. So it just a little eye opener for me yesterday. I had to get things, all I had was my rest slid a little bit on me, and that was it, man. That's all it took. So had to get everything reset back to where it was supposed to be. But just a little tip for all you guys and gals out there running around hunting over this next week.
It's a good reminder. I like to call it a confidence arrow. I like to shoot, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 at the most, just 2 or 3 arrows before you head out if you can. And it's, again, just to get that confidence, make sure everything's on. And as I always say, I like to go shoot. Most of the time it's fine. So you put 2 good shots, in the vital area, and you tell your buddies, well, if we go out this afternoon and I mess this up, we know it's operator error because the bow's right on point. So
that's exactly right.
There you have it. So there you go, folks. Good luck this week. Best wishes for all of you. Be smart, be ready. And somebody's going to get the job done, and I can't wait to hear about it. So you let us know. You visit us on social media. Tell us your stories, and we'll appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Best of luck to you, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks for downloading the Petersen's Bowhunting Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Pick up the latest issue of Petersen's Bowhunting Magazine on your local newsstand, or connect with us online at bowhuntingmag.com.